And I guess I'll explain a bit more about what you can find in AZEEMA. It represents women and non-binary folk from West Asia, North Africa, and South Asia. And within the pages of the print magazine, you can find like incredible stories, written pieces by the women themselves. You can find interviews. You can find beautiful visual stories, and it's just a really like beautiful way of telling our own stories authentically. So I guess that's kind of what I'm passionate about. And yeah, I come from an image making background, so I take a lot of photos, and for me it's really important to not only visibly represent people but also tell their stories and hear their own voices too. So that's a lot about kind of the ethos of AZEEMA and why it exists. So yeah, this is our 4th print issue. I don't know if I should pass it around so you guys can have a look. Yeah, just feel free to pass that around so you guys can have a look. But since doing the print, I think we realized that so many people wanted to see more, and we created the online. So we have like an online website now, which has more room for stories and to be able to share more worldwide. And since then, we also created a creative agency where we can work in industry to physically change representation and the way that things are created. Everything we do comes from a place of authenticity. We want to showcase like our true selves in everything that we do, whether that's through doing photo shoots, producing cultural events. Gosh, like we do so much, like it's actually really difficult to explain, but yeah, through the agency we're still growing that at the moment, but we do a lot of different things in the cultural kind of sphere, and we hope to grow that and do more partnerships and yeah, continue to diversify the landscape really. What else can I say? Okay, so my team is there's 4 on the as like the core team. So myself, my senior editor Eva Husseini, we've got Sanaya Arshad, my deputy, Dalia Aldu, who is the digital editor, and we have an amazing team of creatives that work with us alongside to make things happen, whether that's through the events that we make or assisting on the shoots with the fashion. So yeah, it's really quite a collaborative effort when we make things, which is lovely.
No, it's fine. So always we like to make these more conversational. So it's informal. So it's always so. In terms of building your team, did people find you, or did you seek out specific people to kind of support your vision?
Sorry. Yeah, I think people found me. I think since the first issue, it was very kind of small and low key. We literally rented a tiny empty shop front to do the first launch, and I was like overwhelmed with emails and messages afterwards, which was incredible. And obviously having the Instagram helped, and I think lots of people kind of found us through that, and people reached out, send us messages or like send us their portfolio, and it kind of happens quite naturally because we've all become friends, which is nice.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's not just like we're colleagues, we're all kind of mates and we all hang out, we go to the same like cultural events and stuff, which is a really great way to meet other people. And also through putting on our own events, people come to it and we get to meet them in person, which is lovely. Yeah.
And then so essentially you're building your community, and then does that end up self-seeding in the way that you build that community with other things kind of being born out of that? As in terms of, obviously, if people are coming to you, does what you're doing, does that encourage other people to kind of either want to be on board with you or almost give them the impetus to want to do similar things?
Definitely. I think AZEEMA starts as kind of like almost like a reference point. Like we've created almost like an archive, a library, and like it's really amazing to see people take reference from it, and even if they're not kind of working with us, it's really great to see the kind of collaboration in that sense, where you can see it affecting like the wider community in creative ways, which is really cool.
And what do you find maybe some of your strongest or biggest challenges since starting and as you continue to grow?
Financial. I started this as my final major project. It wasn't really intended to be a functioning company, or that wasn't the intention really. So that's been quite difficult, figuring out how to navigate what is expected of you, and also like how to run something professionally. Like, no one teaches you how to do that. I might have been taught how to take photos, but I haven't been taught how to manage a business. So that's interesting. But yeah, definitely financial and with business, I think, are the biggest challenges for us. And thankfully, there are programs which are there to help. And I've just started doing. I have a place on the Black Business Incubator at Somerset House, which I'm really grateful for, which is giving me the opportunity to learn more about how the inside of a business works properly, and I'm really grateful for that, because otherwise I wouldn't have access to that information. So yeah, I guess those would be the biggest, and they still are. Like, we're still working through those challenges now.
Sometimes there's some, and I don't mean this patronizingly, the idea of like naivety when you launch things is sometimes the best way, because maybe now further down the line you might second guess, or kind of that idea of hindsight, you might not do things in those ways. But often the idea that when we start with the purity of just honest intent, because we feel that we need to make a statement or make a change, that often is a better driving force than if once we realize the calculated decisions that we have to make. Often for me, that's like time to step out the door, but it's too late. So I think having started the way that you started was obviously the best way, because you're doing it because you believe in it, as opposed to making a calculated, actually, this is going to do really well for my community, and do it because it will work really well because of particular brands. And how do you find that? How do you find working with brands? Do you find that you're able to work in a way that they understand what it is that you're trying to say in terms of this kind of support that you want from them? Or do you find challenges in that?
I think working with brands is always challenging, because they will always have their agenda. They always want something. But then it's also we have to always remember that we're in a position where we can start to make change, whether it's kind of asking for them to support your community more long term, or whether it's, asking them, what are you giving back to our community by, after we've partnered with you, or, it's kind of like starting the conversations from the inside out. And it's difficult working with brands. It is. You kind of have to negotiate and, tick some of the boxes, but also ask them to change some of the boxes. And that can be challenging. And I think with AZEEMA, we only take on the work that we want to do, and we always vet the brand before we agree to anything. We kind of make sure it's aligned with what we are doing and what we stand for. And if we don't feel comfortable with a brief, or if we don't feel comfortable with the company, then we say no, even though we're not in like a financial position to say no.
That was my next question.
Like, we will still say no, because it's just not right for us, and not right for the people that support us, and it's not right for us personally. So it's kind of difficult sometimes.
But that in itself is actually really amazing, that you can make that stance of generations gone by. Often I feel my generation has probably often had to accept certain confines on the things that we might choose to do, and the idea that there was a one in, one out policy in terms of how we would articulate who we are would often mean that some people would end up doing things that would mean it would compromise themselves, their identity, their community. And I'm not advocating that as a good or a bad thing, but in terms of timing. But I think we're now in a time where projects and platforms like yourself allow you to be able to stand on your truth, which it's a really powerful place to be.
Thank you.
Maybe we can speak to Nada, and then we'll continue more conversations with Jameela later.
Thank you. I've got some slides, I think. Okay. I am Nada. Just while we wait. Just while we wait.
Small commercial break. So tell us a bit about
right. So I'll just start, and then when they come up, they come up. It's fine. With that. Right. Yeah. It's okay.
Go for it.
So I'm going to talk to you today about Fashion Liberation Collective of North Africa, which started off as an idea in the back of my head when I was looking for information or authentic sources to kind of kickstart my PhD. And I found it more and more difficult to find any substantial information from my part of the world, you know, because of colonialism and because of that kind of false narrative that was presented. And it became exceedingly kind of evident that there was this huge gap in our history that was never really addressed. And it was either really, it was some kind of fantasy or fiction, which was kind of portrayed through Orientalist art or through specific textiles that were brought over during the colonial period, and they were really exotic. And there was this kind of overview of what North Africa was and what it was to be a North African. So if you were Egyptian, you had to look a certain way, or you had to dress a certain way, and the landscape looked like this, you know, Saharan desert everywhere. Same with Algeria and Morocco. And there's always been this ongoing fantasy. I spent a lot of time, my background's in design and then trend forecasting, and I spent over 6 years designing in New York for various labels, and then I designed for brands in Egypt. I then designed, freelanced in the UK, and it was always something that came to people's attention. As soon as I said I was Egyptian, I'd get asked some interesting questions like, do you live in a pyramid? Do you own a camel? And these are people I worked with. So it was, but I used to kind of, it used to irritate me, but I used to have it in the back of my mind and not do anything about it, because it was my job to be that person and to, you know, provide advice for that part of the world, whether it was working with factories there. They tended to send Nada, kind of the exotic member of staff, to work with them. And it worked for me at the time. But obviously, after having kids and growing older and embarking on that research journey, I realized, you know, wow, we are really lacking in our own narrative. And there's all these identities that, you know, we kind of have within ourselves as well, as being colonized or coming from different places or living in the UK. So I am British as well, and having to kind of juggle all these different identities, but also look for information that worked for my PhD and what I was trying to do, which was decolonize North African fashion, became exceedingly more difficult. So that is why I started the Fashion Liberation Collective. And the idea was to gather as much archival information, to gather have some kind of platform or some kind of advice service even for young designers and artists from North Africa. You can go to the next slide if you like. Or add the next one, it's okay. So I started trying to spread the word, if you will, and trying to get more people involved who had the same ideology and who wanted to achieve the same thing, which was, you know, designed by us, for us, but also for the rest of the world. So instead of Louis Vuitton picking, for example, I don't know, an Amazigh, like North African symbol off one of the things that I'm wearing, they would come, the idea would be eventually they would be able to come to the collective, and a North African designer who had expertise and was informed about their practice would be able to design for them and therefore get credit. I started it alone. I think it was about over 2 years ago, and obviously no financial backing. But luckily we have about 10 core members who are really dedicated to everything we do. And these are some of the things we've been involved with. So I'm a lecturer at UE on the fashion communication degree, but we're also part of the Global Fashioning Assembly, which is going to be next Saturday. And that again was self-funded and started from one idea to kind of decentralize the idea of summits and to get our message out there. I'm also the North African Hub for Research Collective for Decolonizing Fashion, and I also teach at Cardiff Met. So the reason I'm telling you this is that the idea of the Fashion Liberation Collective is to get as many people out there who can, again, change the information and really look at what is being put in libraries as authentic, for example, images of, let's say, Egypt in the 1920s, and actually say, that's not correct. This is not an authentic image. This is not what people dress like. This is not actually real. This is some fabricated fantasy. And this is the reality. So that becomes the trickiest part, is finding the real images and going back there and going through archives and finding the time and money and people who are passionate enough about this to actually join in this venture. And sorry, the reason I've put up these two kind of this picture and this painting on top of it was because this was when I realized, when I was gathering images for my collective and for my PhD, how stark the difference is between the depiction and the reality. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. So these were the main aims of the collective when we started. It's turned into somewhat of a family, and all our designers are local. All of them are self-funded. We try and offer some kind of place for people to go to get advice even, or to visit each other in local communities. So for example, we've got a few artists and designers in Morocco that are now working together to create an exhibition, which is something they wouldn't have been able to do if they were doing it on their own. And the idea is to also promote that unique aesthetic of North Africa or of those countries. And it's not about a westernized version of those clothings, or it's their own aesthetic, which is rooted in, history and culture and depth. So I'm wearing some of my collective members' things actually today, but these were our aims when we started. I say we when I started, but when more joined. And yeah, I always say, like, anyone can join, anyone is welcome. It's been quite kind of humbling, learning about even my own heritage and going really far back into my roots and figuring out when we became mixed and when we didn't, and the different families and how we used to dress as a people. And that was really different to the idea that I had, because I had so many years of this image that people told me I was, and I actually wasn't this person. So yeah. So these are some of our members. Tener Concept is based in Algeria. She is inspired by North African fashion or Amazigh fashion, as well as African wax coated fabrics, which she sources from, she sources them from all around Africa, but they are manufactured by people that she has physically met. And it's something that I really appreciate about her. We've also got Zainab, who is based in Morocco. She is an artist maker. She does also design, but she does a lot of work with live installation pieces. She focuses mainly on Amazigh weaving. And we have some more kind of high-end fashion brands such as Ruh, which means spirit or soul, which is an Egyptian brand, and they hand make all these beautiful leather bags in Egypt, and they're all made Egyptian leather. It's an actual ancient Egyptian weaving method. So the reason they started was the lady used to really, really love Louis Vuitton bags, and that was her passion. She collected them. She would go around the world finding them. And then she said, well, hang on, we have really good quality leather in Egypt, so why are we not making our own, high-end couture bags? And that's how she started. I also have some other members that are based in Egypt or based around decolonial arts. So Spike Dennis, he's a cross-stitch designer. And his work is heavily influenced by the idea of decoloniality and reclaiming heritage and voices. And I also have Dr. James Green, who's a collage artist based in Egypt and teaches there. Yeah, this is just more of the members. So Shafial Wakil, she's a silver jewelry designer, and Wahran Fashion Week, which is the fashion week based in Wahran, which are doing really well at the moment. I think that's all of them. And this is just some of the things that we do.
Thank you. When working with, and there's more.
Oh, okay, sorry. No, this again was just an example of the research, sorry.
No, but they're powerful images anyway, so it's not, don't apologize. I think they're incredibly powerful. When working with local artisans and you're introducing the notion of them standing in their own truth, is that something that people adopt really easily? And I just say that from a point of view that having grown up under colonial understanding, sometimes, and I'm going to speak for myself, but sometimes it's very hard to be able to fully live as who you should be and design from a point of view that doesn't have that reference in, especially when you've grown up in a Western society. So the idea of actually creating from your own truth as opposed to a European fashion ideal, how do people tend to respond when you're engaging with them?
So yeah, I've had this problem. When we started out, it was very much, we had a lot of people interested. We want to be members. And it was, right, when are we going to do a show in London? That was the first question I got asked. When is my work going to London? When am I going to London? And it was that point that I realized that it was more about the people who wanted to achieve the same thing, rather than kind of just gain off. We want everyone to gain off being part of the collective, and we want to enrich their work and everything. But at the same time, there are two camps of design, especially in Egypt, where you have very westernized designs that fit into that kind of the Western market ideology. That most of them are evening brands, bridal brands. They're very successful. They're international brands by all means, but they are a Western aesthetic, and they've made it very clear that they do not want to be part of the collective in any way. But there's another group of people who, like myself, when I now design, I'm able to be picky, and in a good way. And I'm very happy and proud that I've reached that position where I can say no to a brand when it does not fit my, design ideology, if you will. But we do have that other half that really, really are going back to their identity and their roots, and they really want to embrace that, and they're researching more. But even if they have a Western aesthetic in there, it's predominantly that North African DNA in there as well. So, but it is hard. It is really hard to.
No, I mean, I think those are the realities, and some, especially, I mean, over there in those places, I imagine in my head it should almost be easier, but obviously because they're surrounded by the symbols, the rituals, and the cultural traits and tropes, which are only theirs. But then because so much is dominated by the West, I guess there is that clamoring and desire to actually appeal to a wider market.
Yes, so that's the yes, and also we have there's very westernized areas of Egypt. It is, you know, and Algeria and Morocco and, you know, all the other places I work with, and it's almost that is the ideal standard. So part of the like collective's aims is to create a separate fashion system that is self-sustaining, but also like almost have our own seat at the table instead of constantly wanting to be invited or constantly wanting to fit this ideal. Like you said, it's breaking that mold, but it's really hard to get rid of that ideology because most of my generation, my grandparents were around when we were occupied, and then they were taught to think a certain way, to dress a certain way, to look a certain way, so that they would look civilized. So then that is passed on through generations. Yeah.
Of course. And that's no, I mean, the term decolonizing is something that we're all surrounded by constantly, especially within the academic space. And so how we refer to that, what that means, because these words almost become like jargon so often anyway. So what it might mean to me, to each of you might be slightly different. And therefore, the institution, what that means is also very different because it's coming from a place of power, and it means about breaking power structures. But how do you break power structures unless you're able to actively engage with those that were originally dismantled by that power? Can we go on to Mr. Ray?
Sorry.
No, it's me that's talking too much.
Hi everyone. I'm Ray. So I'm going to do a very quick CV synopsis. I think the best way to kind of do that is by starting off by saying all the intersections that I'm somehow a part of. But I think the reason why I'm saying that is because those intersections are in everything that I do. So I'm queer I grew up below the poverty line in Tower Hamlets. Obviously I'm brown, I'm Bangladeshi, Muslim, and neurodiverse. So those 5 few things, all of them, they amalgamate together and they come into every project. So I do quite a few different art forms. So I kind of want to walk through why I do them. So everything that I do is always solution based. It's when I see a problem and then I'm thinking, how can I use my skill set to create a solution? Fashion almost became that. So I graduated from here 2014. I started my brand in 2018 through a conversation with Sarah Moa. She kind of looked at the work and was just like, cool, you want to do this thing. You did it at your graduation. Why aren't you doing it now? And it comes down to that thing about money. No one wanted to fund it. So, and I ain't got money like that, so I can't do that. So then she was like, cool, I'll help you. And then that's when IFS, the International Fashion Showcase, started. And I represented Bangladesh there. And I wanted to continue the thing that I did for my BA, which is highlight artisan communities in Bangladesh. And the reason why I want to do that is because actually the artisanal communities in Bangladesh are depleting. Like, people don't want to do that work. And fair dues, because actually you make more money being an Uber driver. So who are we to tell them, keep doing this artisanal work because I love looking at it in a museum, like it's not going to run. So we were like, cool, we'll do some new designs. Like, let's actually bring out and venture out into new markets. And it's working. And the reason why that kind of like started out was actually this interview that I saw, which kind of mirrors what you guys were saying, is this interview with an Indian designer called Sabyasachi Mukherjee, who anyone South Asian in the room will know him because he's huge. And he was trying to break New York Fashion Week. This is back in the 90s. And then Susie Menkes, the journalist, just kind of looked at him and was like, look at you struggling here. What are you doing? India is about to boom. Go to your people. They're going to take you and they're going to give you everything that you need. Then the Western market will come to you. And that interview has always stayed in my mind, and fashion, I'm kind of following that same model. The other thing that I do is film, and so I'm working on a trans documentary following 4 girls in Bangladesh. That kind of came about through the artisanal work in Bangladesh. It happened by chance. I met 4 girls. They actually tried to rob me, not gonna lie. Fair dues, the struggles there were real, and I actually came back, started researching, working with Human Rights Watch, working with the UN, really to understand the historical, societal context as to why that happened to me, and then to probe a solution. And obviously within my skill set, film isn't one of them, but storytelling is. So I was like, cool, we'll do a documentary. And it's been 4 years in the work now. So we've just recently been signed by a production company in Finland called Anerva. So it's called Body of My Own. it isn't going to come out yet for another 3 years. We've got like 2 more trips left. But again, that was problem solution based. And then the film you're about to watch, again, it's a problem solution based thing. I grew up in Tower Hamlets, East London. I'm here because of all the amazing groups. I don't know if Bernie's here, but there's a lot of amazing mentors who have got me to this position. It's because I didn't have that privilege to do art, to play about with those things. And I still see those problems now. And a lot of the young people that I mentor through these programs, it's about looking at what privilege do I have and how can I use that privilege for good. And it's that thing of, again, it comes down to money. For some reason, with the brand and all the stuff that I was doing, I somehow managed to wiggle my way into rooms of power. And I was like, cool, now I'm in here. What's my duty? I can't just like sit here and enjoy the drinks. So true story. I was like sat there and I was like, this isn't it. This isn't it for me. So I don't go to them anymore. But I was just like, cool. Now we're in this room of money. Now how can I tap into that money? So growing up in East London, all my family speak hella Cockney. I don't, because I worked in luxury fashion. And then I was like, this voice is going to bring me commission, and it did. So now I speak like, posh white people. So I'm like, cool, we're going to use that. So then I literally use that to kind of speak to stakeholders, get money and funding to do amazing projects like this, which is always about home. And at the moment, I'm working with 7 young Bengali Muslim people from East London. One of them who's a student here, Aisha, and it's currently live. It's called My Home, My Bari, which just means my home, and Bari means village in Bengali, but it also means village in Italian. And a lot of the Bengali diaspora in the UK have travelled through either straight to here or have gone through Italy and then come to London, which is kind of where this is birthed. We're in our 2nd iteration at the moment, which is currently live at the Museum of the Home. And this is the film to kind of like show everyone in words better than mine what home means to people.
And for me, home, politically, I'm an Eastern girl. Emotionally, again, I would say it's where my mother lives. I share the house with my mother, my family, I grew up. Spiritually, spiritually, it's my bedroom is my Zen place.
Home for me today looks different to how other people see home. When I was young, lost my own familial ideas of home and then had to rebuild what I thought was a home. And I've been very lucky that I get to build it with my amazing friends and the amazing supporting network that I have around me. And through them, I found that home for me is very holistic. It's not grounded by something geographic, and it's not grounded by bricks and mortar. For me, it's something more. It's an emotion.
We had one room, which was our living room, our sitting room, our bedroom, and then we had another room, which was our kitchen and my bedroom, and which we had a bunk bed in there, and that was very normal for people to have. If you tell anybody now they've got a bunk bed in the kitchen, they'll think you're slightly nutty. But now, but that time it was very normal because there was not enough space.
So it's important for me, I can continue on what my mum set up, which is a really lovely home that we live in, where my kids and their kids can come and stay and play. And it's also a sanctuary for a place where I can work.
I don't usually spend a lot of time in the houses that I live in, because for me, they don't feel like home. For me, home for me is in my friends' houses. It's having dinner with them. It's going to like an art exhibition with people who love me and I love them. And I think because I now see home like that, it's different.
So we've got quite a nice community, which is really important for me, knowing that I've got neighbours that got my back.
During COVID, when we had to work almost 18 months from home, the home and my work life completely melded. And sometimes that was a weird space to be. You've got a Zoom call and you're in a blazer and in a tie or looking really professional, and your mum's sort of making curry.
Visually, I'm obsessed with the idea of home, or more so the idea of the home that I grew up in, the home that I had when I was a child and a teenager. I'm obsessed with how the carpet looks, to how the wallpaper was, to how my mum made me feel, to how me and my siblings interacted, to what my dad made us wear, all of those things. And I've taken them into my professional life, and I've used my work and my creative work almost as a way to understand what I really loved about that home and see how can I bring those emotions that that home made me feel in the only way to do that is through emotion.
I've probably got too much stuff in my house, but I don't have an issue with it. It's my house and it's how I like to live. A lot of the stuff is of mine, some of it's of my mum's. We used to go around collecting stuff from jumble sales, and because she was a single parent, everything we've got is a bit
So I had previously already done an exhibition inspired by British Bangladeshi homes, especially from the 1970s. It's an era of British Bangladeshi history that I'm very much obsessed with. And I did an exhibition at the Somerset House called the International Fashion Showcase. And through that work, I started to have many conversations around the idea of home, especially with Ruxana. And this is where this project was kind of born. She approached me and asked me to lend my creative eye to the project, and it's now blossomed into this incredible project where we're documenting almost as live history of what the young people really see and are inspired by from the people who came before them and the vision of what they think British Bangladeshi homes will look like in the future.
Becca and I had a conversation when we were talking about ideas to celebrate Bangladesh 50, and she said, why don't we do an installation? But she hadn't come up with anything else other than that. Then I thought,
well, the
okay,
video's frozen, so I'll just ramble. So if you want, we can cut it. But
2019.
But basically, what that ending was kind of talking about was that Tower Hamlets Council approached me to do this exhibition. I was like, okay. Initially, some of the other artists in the area were also commissioned as well. But for me, it's about this idea of legacy. So I was like, okay, you've given me the set amount. I took a lesser fee and I was like, we're going to do a youth program, because I was like, what else? It's about funneling new talent into the spaces that we're saying need it. So actually, we need to cultivate, we need to work with those young people to actually give them a taste level, a way of working about craftsmanship within whatever they're doing, be it jewelry, sculpture, anything. And then initially the budget was quite small. So I've got a big mouth, which I'm sure you guys can tell. I went straight up to the other stakeholders and was like, no, run me more money, because if anyone hasn't been to, is like a place where everyone looks like me. It's like, it means so much to so many Bengali people. And I was like, let me take over the whole of Brick Lane. So then I had to speak to bigger stakeholders and managed to get that. So then it ended up becoming a very big, like 60 grand project. And we ended up doing this 1 month takeover where we had tours happening on the street with Queen Mary University students giving like very geographical, factual information. And then it ended in an exhibition space where you were looking at work by young people who were envisioning what the new Bengali is going to look like. And ultimately what I kind of want to wrap with is kind of on that note, which is a lot of the times, be it in fashion, be it in whatever I was doing, everyone's ideas of what my work should look like sometimes overtook what I actually wanted to do. And what I'm trying to teach the young people is do whatever you want. Like, actually what I really saw was, and this is no shade, big example, but just like a Susan from like Derby can do a project around like Dadaism, but if there's a brown student, it has to be about her identity. And I'm just like, the lack of autonomy and agency in that is for me where the problem lies. It's ultimately why I really love teaching here, because actually we get to dismantle that. It's actually saying to someone, do whatever you want, because actually this is the space for it. Like, if you want to do a sculpture that has nothing to do with anything about the why you've got a headscarf on or why your mum, you know, is the way she is, you just want to do it because you love graffiti, like, go off, like, do that. So ultimately that's what I'm gonna keep doing. And yeah, there's some other exhibitions on at the moment as well, and yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Yeah. I'd like to think that claps for all of the brilliant guests. We've got about 10 minutes, so are there any questions in the audience? All of you have got big mouths. I know a lot of you in there. So I don't know why you're all sitting so quiet. I also, they all had to say was so amazing as well. So oh, come on, guys.
not a question, but it was just something that I'm going to take away from what you said. It's not ticking the box, it's changing the box. I think that is really powerful. Oh, I've got to repeat it. Oh, sorry. Yes. So, yeah, I'll just repeat what I just said. Yeah, I think it was really powerful what you said about not ticking the box, but changing the box. And I think that's something that I think we should all take away, you know, so we don't have to fit into anything, you know, it's other things have got to fit into what we want them to be. And I think that's a one thing, the most powerful thing that I'm going to take away from what you from your presentation. So thank you for that. And all of the presentations were brilliant. Right, the film was excellent, and just hearing you talk about your practice is really inspiring, and as with you, Nadia, as well. So thank you all for giving your presentations. So I didn't have a question.
Any more?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. So I take it, I'm not sure about have you all studied here, right? I know you did. You did. Yeah. Two of you, yes. But what my question is, I'm a teacher. I teach in safe-space criticism, so I deal with a lot of students that are dealing with issues of racism, which is an ongoing machine. I've been sort of addressing this in all the sessions, really. But I'm just sort of wondering, what advice would you give to the students right now? How to, work through the racism, which is, from the students and the teachers as well, right? So yeah, that's the question.
Speak up, honestly, and if they don't have the power to speak up, and you know that they don't have the power to speak up, bring them to me, bring them to David Capel. There's so many other POC students who can be the voice for them, because obviously I understand it's always a big subject to have to vocalize what pain you're going through. If you can't do it, use somebody else as a catalyst to do it for you. And ultimately that is what I will always say to students: we can speak up for you, because actually it's a collective responsibility. It's not down to the student to actually take any ownership of the pain that they're in. It's actually us as facilitators, as educators, to actually take control of that.
Also, in addition to that, the fact that FACE exists, FACE came together in response to the racist attack on George Floyd, and how to deal and temper and be able to interact at an academic and institutional and from a cultural level to be able to respond to that. So even if you don't feel that you've got the voice, the FACE organisation is able to be there to be able to support whatever it is that you or your students might be going through.
And what about AZEEMA? So magazine as well.
I don't work here, but all I can say is from my own experience when I studied here, and I think it's quite easy to take what happens here and kind of suffer in silence with it. I know that I struggled a lot when I was here, so and maybe I suffered a bit in silence and didn't always speak out about the things that I felt. So I would agree really with what was said, because there are people here who can help, and also you can speak to about in confidence. Yeah.
Last thing, I also would say, because obviously sometimes you don't get a choice in the pain that you're given. So I would, and I know this from even all of us in the industry, if there's a way to channel that pain and cash in, and literally I think it's that thing of okay, cool, it's happened. And then obviously if I think about my experiences when I was here as a student, there was literally a little crew of us who are all the POC students, and we all support each other, not only while we was here, when we went out into the industry. And I think it's horrible that it's happening, but almost in that same instance where the education establishment sometimes can't take responsibility, that we have to walk away from that and just be cool, that was that. Now what am I going to do with that? Because now it's happened to me regardless. And there's a way to channel that into art and into something to process, to actually make a change. Because then if I think about all the artists and designers who I graduate with who are doing incredible now, like they've allowed so many other voices to come through. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like AZEEMA's first magazine launch, I don't know who else was there, was lit, because actually it was just full of everyone. It was gang, it was everyone who was part of like 5 years prior, 5 years after. We were all in it together, and it was just like a hungama. Like, everyone just went nuts because we were like, we're finally here, we've got this space, which is so similar to We Are Face. And the last thing, because I know we've got to wrap up, is if anyone here is a stakeholder and you see a young person, a young student, a graduate who has an incredible idea, fund it.
Thank you.
That sounds great. I don't. Is anyone else?
Sorry, I'll try to keep it brief. Thank you so much, everyone. It was kind of about talking about choosing which brands you choose to work with and who you don't, and also with your collective NADA, like kind of how, if you want to bring that to like a larger stage, how you choose whether an institution is worth kind of sharing your knowledge with, and what can be done if there's more platforms that are needed, or if how institutions can change to ensure that you want to work with them. That makes sense.
I'm just trying to think through what you just said. I think it is always challenging working with brands, and I think sometimes they might not understand fully what you're trying to do. So it's important from our perspective to always educate people. There's like almost like two sides of what we do with AZEEMA. It's like, yes, we're for the community, but we're also here to educate people and change things. That's also part of what we do. So I think we almost hope, like, by working with these institutions, like, we're kind of changing things little by little, even if it's just like, okay, we've done a cultural event that was curated by us for the community, it's authentic, like, that's the kind of work we want to be doing. And if that helps to bring in other people and other communities and other collectives, then great. That's what we're trying to do. It's not just about AZEEMA as a standalone, it's about setting the like level for everybody else to come in, and you know what I mean. So it's like it is always really difficult when choosing whether to work with an institution or a brand, but it always comes down to kind of whether the ideologies align and whether you both agree on what you're trying to do. And if those things if they align, then great, like, do the collaboration and push for as much budget as you can to make sure that everybody's paid fairly. And that's something that we're still trying to work with, because a lot of the time people don't understand that this is not just this is not a charity, this is people we're working with, and people need to be paid for the work that they're doing. So getting people and institutions and brands to understand that is also part of the problem. But yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, from an education perspective, the main reason I became a lecturer was A, for my kids, and B, well, for my kids, but in a different way. It was so they could look in a room and see someone that looked like them, teaching them correctly, if you will, about themselves. And it was more about knowledge. Knowledge is pure power. And if you are knowledgeable about yourself and about your culture and your heritage, however you choose to put that out in the world, you can then stand in a position of power and kind of demand, in a way, what changes need to be made. And I agree completely. It's almost a vetting process, which is a really bad way of putting it, but it has to be done. And although, yeah, you'll lose money, you'll lose favor with some brands or some people that you might have got on with in the past, but if you really believe in making any kind of change, it's small steps, and it's about putting forward your pitch and your idea. So when they give you something as a proposal to look at, whether it's an education establishment, whether it's a brand, whether it's a designer, whoever it is, and you disagree, you send back a counter pitch and you say, this is what I can give for you and this is what I want in return. And it's about being quite kind of assertive and powerful in that position, and just saying no, even if at that moment in time it seems that you're at a loss and it doesn't seem like the wisest decision. But I always tend to go with my gut. So I have not worked at establishments as a lecturer because I simply don't think that it would benefit the wider kind of spread of knowledge. It would limit me, and in turn it would have like a really bad effect, you know. So yeah.
There was the designer Tolu Coca, we were once in conversation, and she had this saying, which is the difference between selling stories and telling stories. And so often many brands and institutions, they essentially just want to sell your story. They want to capitalize on who you are, your identity, your referencing, whereas all of my esteemed guests here are trying to tell their story. And then, yes, they need to capitalize on it for their own benefit and for their community. And that becomes the difference when you work with different institutions or brands, and understanding whether they're just trying to milk you for more of what you've got to sell more product, or whether they actually wish to be part of your story and help you share your truth. That's it. We're out of time. Thank you.